On commencer l'ordre du jour.
We're going to begin. This is the fourth Parliament, meeting number 11.
Minutes of the previous meeting. I believe we have, nous avons un rappel au règlement.
We have a point of order or a request by Ms. de Bellefeuille. Yes. I have both, Mr. Speaker, Chairman rather. First of all, I'd like to move up point 7. And I'd like point 9 to be done after item 4. The idea here is to concentrate all decisions regarding members and administration of the MPs and make sure we go through it today. That's my proposal. I don't know if I have the agreement of my colleagues. Do we have agreement? Mr. Brassard would like to speak.
Well, I don't disagree with Madame de Bellefeuille. I think we should be going right in camera and dealing, in my view, with item 8 first, item 7 second. I think we can defer item 6 in camera to later, and then we move into the public portion after that. And my suggestion would be that we move to item 4 in the public portion after we finish with those two items in camera. I think they're very timely matters that need to be addressed. That would be my proposal, Mr. Chair.
Alors, Madame de Bellefeuille, est-ce que...
So, Madame de Bellefeuille, I'm not opposed to that, but I do want to warn my colleagues that we may have only one more meeting, and I'd like us to leave each other by making decisions on all the points that affect riding offices, budgets, and so forth. I want assurance that we can get that through this today or maybe next week, not leave in June without decisions being made.
Julian.
I agree with Ms. de Bellefeuille about that. It seems to me that we're going to meet next week, inevitably, when I look at how long our agenda is today. So perhaps it's better to think about what we should discuss today. I agree with Ms. de Bellefeuille that points 4 and 9 are important. And what we discuss next week, since we have in-camera meetings as well, how to have this work better, perhaps we could have an hour today where we get to in-camera after doing 4 and 9. That's a possibility with which I agree. And the other items, important things, could be left for next week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It'd be my view that we have an agenda in front of us. I'm comfortable with the order that's there. I think if we wanted to invert one of the in-camera items, then we could talk about that, but that would be left for in-camera. But I think we should just proceed with the agenda we have.
Okay, Mr. Brassard.
Thank you. After hearing the discussion, again, I think we can get through 4 items today, 2 in camera as a priority, and 2 in public. If I hear Madame de Bellefeuille correctly, item 9 and item 4 are the in-public priorities. I agree with that. In camera, I would suggest number 7 and 8, and if there is an opportunity to meet next week to deal with these other issues, then we're prepared to do that at any point at the beginning of the week or at the end of the week, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That would be my recommendation.
Consent to adopt the new order, which would be items number 8, followed by number 7, then over to number 4, and then to number 9. Does that make sense? Did I read that correctly?
Moi, j'avais pas compris ça
okay.
comme ça.
No, I hadn't understood it that way. I had understood that we'd start with 4 and 9 in public, and later we'd go to other things. 4 and 9. I had heard go in camera first to begin. Mr. Brassard.
Well, I think there is a priority on the part of the committee to deal with item 8, considering that we're running up to a timeline. I don't expect items 7 and 8 will take much discussion. And I expect that perhaps item 4 and item 9 will take longer discussions, but I expect that we could get through these 4 items within the allotted time.
So I guess what I'm looking for is direction. First of all, do we agree on the change, and what will that change be? Do we go the public route first and then over to the in camera, or vice versa? Because I'm hearing different stories.
My proposal is that we go in camera first and then we go public second.
Okay, that's what I had heard, but that's not. Is that acceptable? Do I?
In the interest of consensus, Mr. Speaker, I will cede on that.
Mr. Holland is shaking his head. No?
No, we have an agenda to deal with the in-camera item. I don't mind if we want to start with the priority item, but I think we have to deal with that first. So my preference would be to do public first. I don't think it'll take a lot of time. We've had conversations on it, but I think it should be dealt with first.
Are we okay to start with 4, 9, and then come back in camera?
You think so? Okay. We'll deal.
Okay,
We're fine.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Oui. Mr. Bellefeuille, yes, I have a brief point of order, perhaps for next week. As you know, there was an event on the Hill regarding security. All members got alerts to inform them of a security concern. You're undoubtedly aware that the French message came in 8 minutes after the English alert message. The form of the message, the color, these were not usual messages as we normally get. Some members of my caucus thought these were hackers who'd sent a message. I talked to the Sergeant at Arms, who's well aware of the situation, but we would appreciate a report about the cause of this problem, because if there had been an event with grave consequences, it's quite unusual that Francophone members get an alert 8 minutes after Anglophones. So if we could clarify this and add that to next week's agenda, I'd appreciate it greatly. Okay, fine. I'm sure we agree to have a report from the Sergeant at Arms at next Thursday's meeting. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to begin with number 8.
Camera first. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, that's my mistake. We've gone back and forth so many times, I got confused. That's fine.
Yeah.
So we'll start with number 4, cost pressures on members' budgets. Mr. Saint-Georges et Monsieur Fernandez vont faire.
Mr. Saint-Georges and Mr. Fernandez have presentations.
I believe so. We have Mr. Entremont here for this the third item, and I guess the question would be whether we allow him to get back to his day.
Realistically, Mr. D'Entremont, if you don't mind coming back at our next meeting, and this way.
I'm wonderful for next meeting, as long as my
Mr. Wright
supporters
as well.
are there. Is that okay?
We apologize for bringing you out.
Not a problem, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Julian. That's a good point. No, I'll finish those up now. While we're still public, do we want to cover item number 2? Affaire découlant de la réunion précédente. Everything's okay? Good. Okay, so we've done 1, we've done 2, and now we'll go over to number 4, cost pressures on members' budgets. Monsieur Saint-Georges.
Mr. Saint-Georges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm presenting to the board proposals about certain questions by members of the board which were analyzed by the administration. These questions concern the impact of the increase in real estate prices and the increase in advertising costs. The first question is about riding offices. In the last 5 fiscal years, the median price of these offices have been higher than increases in budgets To give members greater flexibility, the administration is asking the board to bring the equivalent of $3,000 a month more to the budgets. This amount is based on median costs of rental of riding offices. The administration is also asking the board to order the CFO to revise the maximum yearly based on the consumer price index. The administration will watch the impact of additional costs given to the central budget and, as need be, will request supplementary funds under the additional funds for 2022, 2023, and maybe 2024.
Residence rental costs, which are the largest expenditure under the travel status expense account. The administration observed that the average rental cost incurred by members increased by about 20% over the past 5 fiscal years, while the account increased by approximately 10% during that same period. As a result, the administration proposes that the board approve a one-time increase of 10% to the travel status expense account to offset the increase in secondary residence rental costs. The final item relates to the advertising limit, which was temporarily increased by 10% to 20% of the members' office budgets as of April 2020. The administration proposes the permanency of the advertising expense account limit to 20% of the members' office budget to provide members with greater flexibility to communicate with their constituents during the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, this concludes my presentation, and I'll be pleased to answer any questions the members may have.
Questions or comments? Questions, commentaires? Mr. McKinnon, followed by Mr. Julian. Mr. McKinnon.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the administration for their work. I can certainly state on behalf of many of our colleagues of all parties that the issues related to providing services to the public are certainly on the increase. There are pressures when it comes to salaries, which are on the increase, as you mentioned, Mr. Saint-Georges. The competition, if we can call it that, for staff means that we're far from parity with others. So there is an issue with competitive salaries. In addition, when it comes to the place where services are provided to citizens, we know that major road arteries where we want to be able to have convenient locations for all our citizens are seeing increased rents. So I appreciate your analysis and I share your conclusions. There are also issues related to the geographic location of the offices. You mentioned large ridings or high-density ridings. Does your analysis anticipate an analysis of differences there might be throughout the country to which we might look in order to bear in mind any future adjustments? Yes. When it comes to the analysis, we looked at the supplements that are given to various members depending on the region or ridings they represent. There's the one about the number of voters, the geographic location. These are supplements that are given to take into account different pressures that may exist in urban centers or in more rural areas where transportation costs are higher. Those are things we look at. We follow up the use of budgets to see if there are any pressures that could occur or that do occur. Okay.
Julian, followed by Mr. Calkins, then over to Mr. Broussard. Mr. Julian.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. This is an important question. We are, as members of Parliament, really the last line of defense for Canadians that are looking for support in a wide variety of federal issues and in interaction with federal ministries. My riding office in downtown New Westminster is an example of that. We've helped about 20,000 people over the years, but we're finding there are more and more people that are coming in to seek assistance. And my job as a parliamentarian is make sure that they get that assistance. When Kabul fell, there was literally a lineup. I'm on Carnarvon Street in downtown New Westminster, a lineup right under the SkyTrain station, and the lineup went around the block and into the area where the SkyTrain station is. So the need is very big, but I've certainly found the high cost of rent that I'm not able to allocate as much of my budget to make sure that we're actually taking care of the increasing caseloads that we're seeing. So I think this proposal helps to address that in part, but I look to the BC model where BC members of the Legislative Assembly, the budget is actually taken out of their member's office budget. It is applied centrally. And there is a criteria by which for each of the offices, you have a certain set number of square meters. You have you have to make sure it's an accessible office. You have to make sure that you have a certain limitations in terms of visibility. All of that is set. And so all of the members of the BC Legislative Assembly have basically the same criteria. And it's a system that works extremely well because it means that those MLAs in high rent district aren't penalized in providing supports to their constituents compared to MLAs that live in communities where there is much, much lower rent. So my question to Mr. St. George and Mr. Fernandez is to what extent they have examined the BC model I would suggest in terms of the recommendations that part of that be to mandate the administration to look at the BC model and make recommendations at a future Board of Internal Economy so that we can look at the best practice, which to my mind is really BC in terms of ensuring that members' office budgets really go to providing services and not to the increasing amount of rent. Were you able to look at the BC model, and is that appropriate that you come back with recommendations at a future meeting?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Julian. We did look at a couple models, and we do intend, obviously, to look at it further. However, for the current state where we're at, we felt that in the existing model we do have supplements that look at electoral and geographical location. So therefore, we already have various levers that are in place to ensure that there's equity from that perspective. Certainly, it's something we could go back and look at a little closer because we'd have to come back in terms of understanding what is the full impact to the members' constituents in terms of the contracts, the insurance, et cetera, but we certainly can do that.
Thank you. So you would be amenable to that, and Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to suggest that we add that to the instructions to the administration, that they come back at a future meeting with recommendations based on best practices. Perhaps there are other jurisdictions that have taken a similar approach, but the BC model seems to me to have really appropriate ramifications for how we structure our work at the local level.
Do we have consensus in requesting that for Mr. St. George? I believe we do. Oh, Madame de Bellefeuille.
I'm not sure. I understand his argument, but that doesn't imperil the adoption of. No, it's a report we're asking for from Mr. St. George to see if there are other alternatives later.
We'll go to Mr. Calkins, followed by Mr. Brassard, et ensuite Madame de Bellefeuille.
And then Mr. Bellefeuille.
To speak to,
Go ahead.
what Mr. Julian brought forward. Look, I don't necessarily have a problem asking for it, but I think we're asking the administration to tackle something that's extremely difficult considering the breadth of the country and the number of the regions that we have and the various costs associated with living in numerous cities in numerous provinces is going to be a much more substantive task than simply looking after the needs and modeling after a single province like British Columbia with one relatively concentrated area. 2/3 of the population of British Columbia lives in the GVA Victoria area. It's a completely different thing than we have for the country. But I mean, if I guess it doesn't stop us from trying. But I wouldn't want to be the one to have to undertake that task. I'm pretty satisfied with what we're actually doing right here.
So what exactly are we saying here? We're not asking for a report, or we are, or there's a problem with asking for some kind of examination? Mr. McKinnon?
I would support Mr. Julian's suggestion that we have an analysis of some of the things that he mentioned, and certainly endorse the proposal as a whole, and unless there are further comments.
Okay. Very good. We'll continue. Oh, Mr. Broussard, did you want to add?
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the administration for coming back with this suggestion. Obviously, staff have been extremely. The demand for their efforts have been extremely large over the course of the COVID pandemic. We've certainly seen that in our office with the amount of interactions that we've had. This will help, and we're hearing from our members as well about the retention of staff, the pay impacts. This will help in that. It's my intention to use any realized savings through this, because of the central budget looking after the office, to increase the salaries of my staff because they, quite frankly, deserve it, and they are relatively low paid in my view compared to some of the other work that goes on. The only thing that I would suggest, and I'm going to look for consensus on this, Mr. Chair, is that in the course of the fiscal year, we're allowed to give one raise to our staff members. And in some circumstances, certainly in my circumstance, I have done that at this point. So I would ask that consensus be sought for a recommendation that we add a waiver for the one-year spacing between employee raises. Because if it is the intent of members to use this money for augmenting salaries for our employees, some of those employees have already received an increase this year, which would make them ineligible until the next year. So I'm looking for some consensus to allow that to occur, Mr. Chair.
Is that something that we would?
That's a good point.
Is that something that we would take care of in camera along with number 7?
We could,
if you don't mind. I think that would be a more appropriate place.
And that's fine. I just, to signal that. I know we're public, and I do want to signal that because it could be a problem for some members that we need to realize, but we can deal with it in camera.
Okay, I know it just seems like it would fit better in item number 7, which is our 4th item. And I think the argument's already been made, and it seems like there's some consensus. So we'll move on. We'll get back to that one in a second. Right now, we've got Mr. Culkins, followed by Mr. Broussard et Madame de Bellefeuille. Mr. Culkins.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarification on the travel status expense account because this is problematic for some colleagues. My understanding is that for those colleagues who choose to purchase a secondary residence or have a residence that they own here in the capital region, there is an allocation for them to, I think it's $50 a day. Is that, if I memory serves me correctly, can you confirm that that's the case?
It's for the ones who own, it's $50 a day.
Yeah. And that has been in place since 2003, correct?
That's my understanding. I don't recall, but we can verify.
It's been a long time.
It's been for some time.
And so any of the increase that we're proposing to the travel status expense account right now would certainly be beneficial to people who stay in hotels and stay in a rented apartment, but would anybody who stays in a purchased residence, would they see any change to that?
No, since there's a maximum they can claim is $50 per day in the month.
All right. The other thing I would like to just get some clarification on is the use of the travel status expense account for members even when they're outside their home province. So if a member of parliament is outside of their home province, they must use the travel status expense account for any hotels or accommodations, whether they're in Ottawa or not. Is that correct?
So where they're outside the national capital regions, they have the choice. They can either charge it to their
MOB?
the TSA or the MOB. So that's why there's some they can maximize. The TSA is only for the use of the member, so not for their employees. So they can charge in this account the accommodation and per diem expenses they incur while traveling in the constituency or in the province or elsewhere in Canada as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Brassard. You're fine? Okay, very good. Nous allons continuer avec
We'll continue with Madame de Bellefeuille. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to thank the administration, which in record time did an analysis based on documented data to really listen to riding offices and our teams. So I appreciate and support the recommendations we have before us. And I agree with Mr. McKinnon when he says that perhaps we have to go further in the analysis on voter supplements and the size of ridings. It's more expensive for a member who's in a rural region to travel throughout his or her riding. If I take the example of the member for Lac-Saint-Jean, who said yesterday that he leaves his office an hour and a half before supper in Normandin, has to come back, that's 3 hours, there's mileage. So I agree with Mr. McKinnon, we have to review those supplements at another time. I think that's important, especially for regions where there are many towns, a lot of mileage to try to go and meet constituents. So thank you very much, and I encourage you to close the debate so we can say adopted. Mr. Julian, and then we'll proceed. Well, Ms. de Bellefeuille has correctly summarized the proposal. I'd also like to thank the finance team about this. I think that with this decision, we'll have better quality services for the public. And that's the essential core of our work as parliamentarians. Okay, that's good. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, we'll proceed. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Holm.
You're on mute, Mr. Holm. You're on mute. We can't hear you. Still on mute. There's a glitch of some sort.
Hello?
There we go.
Hello?
You're on. You're good. We have a problem plugging plugging it in, or no, you're back off again. There seems to be some kind of a problem.
What? Now?
Okay, you're on now then.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, so I can now, you can now hear me and I can't hear you. So I have to replug this in, but anyway, I'll figure that out later.
There's no interpretation. Apparently the quality of the sound is not
But now? No?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
No.
Say a few words in English so that we can see if the interpreters can hear you. No, we lost you again.
Is that working?
Yes. Okay, we have, good. Please proceed.
Okay, so there's something wrong with that other headset. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, yes, I'll extend my thanks to the House administration. The reality is that our offices provide essential functions on the front lines for Canadians. And This is going to entirely, I think, go towards assisting constituency offices to be able to help their staff, and I think that's important. I just had a question to follow up on Mr. Culkin's question. So there hasn't been an adjustment in the amount for the daily amount for those that own a residence. And I'm sorry, it's not. I just want to confirm that it's not contemplated to change that $50 a day in this as well. There's no adjustment to that.
Monsieur Patrice, I believe, has.
That is correct. It's not in the proposal today for an adjustment.
Okay, so I just was curious what the logic was if there's an adjustment being made for 10%. For the budget generally and for other related expenses, but not to adjust that expense that hasn't been adjusted in a long time. Would it not also make sense to adjust that?
Monsieur Patrice or Monsieur Saint-Georges, I believe Monsieur Patrice wants to take this question.
Yes. Given the discussion that we had today and the various elements raised, and obviously it was our intention to proceed with a deeper analysis in terms of all cost pressures, our different rules, and to simplify and clarify in terms of to see and obviously consult with the various housely whips and so on to address in a more kind of ongoing matters that would create issues. So the administration will do that review in consultation with the various whips in the course of the summer to address any kind of inconsistencies or pressure that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I guess sorry, just as a final point on that, Mr. Speaker, I think that if there is a process by which these things are adjusted automatically, as many other items are, so that we don't have to deal with this on an ongoing basis, that should be adjusted sort of on as costs change, it would change in the way that, say, per diems automatically change. I think that makes sense, so that we don't have to continue revisiting it. But I would just posit that if you're changing the other amounts, and this amount hasn't been changed in a long time, it would seem logical to me that there also be a change there. I think that seems to be a bit of a miss. I don't know if other people have the same feeling. I would be comfortable applying the change to that as well.
Okay, very good. So then what we're doing then, I seem to have consensus on the recommendations, and we will be coming back with a report. The staff will be coming back with a report on the office costs, possibly looking at the BC model, and then from there, the other issues will be looked at on a separate basis. So we're good? Very good. We'll continue then with item number 2, which is item number 9, professional development project and training for members and employees. I believe Ms. Daigle will be making the presentation. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. We'll let Ms. Daigle continue, and Ms. Lavoie will be there as well.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I present a project about a professional development project and training for members, employees. A one-year project had been approved, up to $5,000 out of the central budget to support training and development to help members with their parliamentary functions. This pilot project coincided with the autumn elections, the pandemic, and the summer break. The limited use of the pilot project made it difficult to evaluate its success. Up to date, 111 MPs used the pilot project, a total of about $150,000. This figure reflects only employees of members because research office employees and others were not included in the original pilot project.
We are recommending that the pilot project period be extended until March 31st, 2023. This will allow for better evaluation and review of the pilot. We are also recommending that the pilot include the employees of House officers and National Caucus research offices, caps would be set based on employee counts commensurate to MP offices. In a related but separate note, in reviewing the delivery of training offerings to member staff, we are also recommending that the existing health and safety trainings, as well as retirement planning training for member staff, be charged centrally. I'm happy to take any questions from the board members.
Questions or comments? Questions ou commentaires? Madame de Bellefeuille.
Ms. de Bellefeuille. Well, Mr. Speaker, I fully agree with the recommendation. I remember there was a meeting where Mr. Holland convinced us that we should go ahead with this pilot project. It was supported by most members of the board. I use this budget for my employees in a pandemic context where it's very demanding for our employees to work and serve the population. They need more training and support. I can tell you that this budget is very well used and very useful for our human resources. We have very good support from your organization, Ms. Daigle. So I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank you, because I heard that you were supposed to leave us for a promotion, I should say, and I'm very proud of you. I'm sure that people for whom you're going to work are very lucky to get your skills, because I appreciated working with you when I was whip. I want to salute your professionalism, and I want to thank you in public for your dedication and great professional rigor. I greatly appreciated working with you as a whip and your team, and I wanted to say so publicly. Thank you, Ms. de Bellefeuille. Mr. Julian. I would also like to congratulate Ms. Daigle and thank you for all your hard work. Congratulations on your promotion. I know that you're going to continue to contribute to our democratic and parliamentary life. Thank you so much. I'd like to ask you a question about this budget, because it seems to me that this wasn't used very much. If we have 111 members out of 338 who used even a penny of this budget for a total of $150,000, the average is $1,300 or so, about a third of the budget that was allocated. I found that budget very important for training. So I'd like to ask you, because having the budget is one thing, but having buy-in from the members is another, so that we can improve training of our employees, that's quite another matter. How can we make sure MPs use this? I think it's logical to use these funds. Thank you, Mr. Julian. Excellent question. The timing of the pilot project that was launched last summer with an election coming up were contributing factors. When it comes to communications, knowledge of the project, I think that's another element. Not all members' offices were aware of it, even though we did have communications in place. I think one of the things we put in place is that we have to have key messages for whip offices so they can bring this to caucus in order to communicate that information to members and their employees, because that's a big part of it. Another element is the availability of the employees to participate in the training and various service offers. Thank you very much. That'll be an important issue. My next question, what's the next step? In my opinion, and that's just my office, it's been a success, this idea of contributing to the training of our employees. They were interested, they used this, they used these amounts. So in my opinion, it's a success, but we have to find out what are the next steps to evaluate whether this is a success. If it is, we should implement it so that it's a permanent thing. That would be important too. So how do you see the coming steps of this pilot project? If we find it's a success, and in my opinion it is, there's no doubt about it, what are the next steps to make sure that this pilot project becomes a normalized, regular program? Thank you, Mr. Julian. The next step would be to make sure everybody's aware of it. And before the end of the pilot project, we'd examine its use. We'll work closely with WIP's offices to make sure that communications take place with members and their employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Madame Daigle for all of her incredible work. It's been absolutely a wonderful pleasure working with you. Wish you every success in the future, and it will be very well deserved, I'm sure. I similarly just want to say that we've used this in our own constituency office to great success, and just to suggest that it's something that every office would benefit from. I think a lot of employees aren't aware of it, so whatever we can do to raise its awareness and make sure that it's as successful as possible, giving our employees an opportunity to have access to funds dedicated for their betterment and training is, I think, incredibly important, and just very appreciative of all the work that's been done to this point.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? So I take it we're all in accordance with this. The recommendation is going through. Very good. And I think.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Julian.
Mr. Speaker, just so I have a sense of when we will be reviewing this program. I know Madame Daigle said before the end of the pilot project, but it seems to me that it's possible perhaps to have an interim evaluation even prior to that, and perhaps have the Board of Internal Economy decide even before the end of the program, whether we feel that the pilot program has been a success. So I wouldn't want to sort of put all of that consideration off into 2023. I think it's something we could examine as early as this fall.
Okay, so we're good till the 31st of March. Now, is there a date that you want to suggest?
I was going to suggest before the end of the year.
The end of the year. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, we'll come back with it before the end of the year. Very good. Ms. Daigle, on behalf of the board, thank you very much for your service, and I wish you all the best. I'm very happy that you're not leaving the Hill. You're still going to be within arm's reach. I should say arm's length, but arm's reach if we need you. And you are leaving a void, but we wish you all the best in your new endeavor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We'll now go in camera. Nous allons aller à huis clos. Ça va prendre.
We're now going to go in camera. It'll take a few minutes.
And as soon as we go in camera, we'll continue. Merci. blank. It's the 2021-2022 year-end financial report and carry forward to 2022-2023. We have Monsieur Saint-Georges et Monsieur Fernandez. C'est à vous. La parole.
You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to present the year-end financial report for 2021-2022. It compares cumulative financial information from this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year. This is the first of two year-end reports. The second one will be tabled with the board next fall, following the external audit. This report, prepared by the administration, is unaudited and is based on cash accounting in accordance with the Public Accounts of Canada. I can account for the accuracy and reliability of the information it contains.
Slide number 2, which is the previous slide, which relates to the year-end results. The authorities for 2021-22 totaled $547.6 million. Expenditures amounted to $510 million, leaving a surplus of $37.5 million. This surplus corresponds to the lapse that will be reported in the Public Accounts of Canada. Next slide, please. As shown in the surplus analysis, the amount of $37.5 million is broken down as follows. 55% pertains to office budgets of members and House officers, attributable to the general election, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as other various items. 17% relates to the budgets of committee associations and exchanges, mainly due to the impact of the pandemic. While 28% pertains to House administration, mainly attributable to job vacancies, the pandemic, as well as delays caused by global supply chain issues. Annually, with the board approval, the House carries forward lapsed amounts of up to 5% of the main estimates, which corresponds to $19.2 million for this fiscal year. Therefore, a total of $6.8 million would be allocated to the office budgets of members and House officers. The remaining $12.4 million would be allocated to the House administration and could be used to offset unforeseen operating pressures as well as various member-related projects and initiatives. For example, the life cycling of IT infrastructure not received last year due to supply chain issues, the continuation of corporate prevention programs related to occupational health and safety, improvements to members' financial management tools, and the management of corporate assets. Par conséquent, je demande à la...
Therefore, I ask the board for approval to include a carryover of $19.2 million in the supplementary estimates for 2022-2023. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Speaker. I'm at your disposal to answer questions. Questions, comments? Do we agree with the recommendation? Yes? Okay, perfect. Mr. Calkins.
So, thank you for the presentation. So, based on the slide that I saw, the carry forward that MPs have from the fiscal prudence or the election-related savings is $6.8 million. Is that right? And of that, the lapsed budgets for members of Parliament was $20.5 million, or 20.58. Did I remember that number correctly?
From prior year, 20.6.
Yeah, 20.6 million. So that's that difference of $12.4 million that you had up on the slide. And you listed a few projects that would be covered with that. And I'm wondering if you could give me some more clarification, because it seems to me that that's money that should be allocated to improving the quality of service that members of Parliament can deliver. So can you assure me that that $12.4 million will be spent directly on things that improve the ability of members of parliaments and their offices?
That was a very good question. So the surplus itself, the $12.4 million targeted for next year, as in previous years, are used for initiatives that the House essentially implements various systems. For example, we have one next year, a very significant one referred to as the expense management system. So that's creating a significant change to the way claims and the way transactions are processed by members directly. So providing I would say, a system that actually is more efficient at the end of the day. It is also used to cover various pressures. For example, at the last meeting, we talked about retroactivity of salaries for certain members within administration. That is not a budgeted item within the authorities, and sometimes we will look at those surpluses, and they may carry forward and be utilized to carry and to offset some of that.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? So everyone's in accordance with the recommendation? Very good. I see heads nodding. We'll move on. Passed. Now we'll go on to, we're off to number 10. And we have Ian MacDonald who will be presenting to us. Mr. MacDonald, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Merci, le Président. Le rapport annuel.
The annual report was distributed to members of the BOIE yesterday following the adoption of the report by the Liaison Committee yesterday. The annual report includes information on the activities of every standing and special committee throughout fiscal 2021-22.
Held 852 meetings, heard from 3,725 witnesses, and presented 148 reports to the House. Total expenditures were $156,000. The current period included an election in the fall of 2021, which helps to explain a small decrease in the level of activity compared to other full or it's comparable to election years, and a small decrease over previous full years. However, if we look at the level of activity from January 1st to March 31st, 2022, there have been more meetings, witnesses, and more hours of meeting than at any other time for the same period during the last 8 fiscal years. The report also contains the new an updated virtual committees dashboard as an appendix, which is also the next item on the board's agenda. And with that, if board members have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? Madame de Bellefeuille.
Ms. de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know how much I love seeing this on the agenda of BOIE meetings. These reports, quite sincerely, reflect all the work done in committee by our members. And when we read this, we see it's a lot of work for the administration, for the analysts, the researchers, the clerks, as well as the members and their staff. Now, to put a few questions to Mr. MacDonald, could you tell us, you wrote it down, but I'd like to hear you elaborate this in public. You had an annex in our documents on my request on the number of witnesses who appear entirely in French or entirely in English. Could you tell us what the percentages of each are as described in your letter? Yes, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Could we interrupt, please? Are we on 10 or 11? We're on 10. I just wanted to make sure we're on 10. I could keep my questions for later, but it's the report anyway, because the dashboard is an appendix. It'll be Mr. MacDonald anyway. I just wanted us to be It's part of 10. It's part of the report. You know, I read my things very carefully, and I saw that the dashboard was an appendix to the report tabled in the House. Okay, we'll continue. Maybe we can do 10 and 11 together. Okay, so is my question in order? Yes, of course. Thank you. As you indicated, Ms. de Bellefeuille, yes, we did research to have that information. Since the beginning of this legislature, we looked at all participants, members and witnesses. 20% of our participants spoke French and 80% spoke English. Just for witnesses, it was 17% and 83% in English. Okay, so 17% spoke French and all the others spoke English. Just witnesses, yes. Okay, that's fine for me. We have to look at this. We hadn't had an update in 2 years, but what I see, Mr. McDonald, it is pretty steady. Ever since we resumed in 2019, the proportions have been about the same. So witnesses choose to express themselves in English 80% of the time rather than French. So it sometimes explains the lack of interpreters, the technology problems, rest on the shoulders of those who speak French or who are unilingual, francophones. In your report, you also talked about technological problems. We do see a clear improvement in interruptions. In February, though, that was a difficult month, as I understood, and we felt it. We even said that there had been many problems in February. That's reflected in the percentage you put in your dashboard. And I think that one of the problems is the headsets worn. Since you introduced the new headset, a better quality headset, what I understand is that all the members of the House of Commons, all 338, each receive 3 headsets, and those headsets cost $120 each. Have you noticed that not many members wear it? Have you seen that these are not devices that are very popular? I went to a meeting of the Liaison Committee last week, and over half of the chairmen were not wearing the regulatory headset, the one we all receive to improve sound quality for interpreters. So what do you intend to do to improve the rate of wearing of these headsets? What's the responsibility of clerks? Because that's a real problem. Thank you for the question. Since the beginning of the pandemic, with all the adjustments we made to ensure sound quality and increase sound quality, we've worked very hard to put in place all the elements necessary to make sure there was good sound quality. Recently, we've seen that these specific high-quality headsets with boom mics were chosen. That does improve the quality of the sound for everybody, for the interpreters as well as for people around the table, those listening at home as well. In our studies, we also saw the importance of these boom mics in sound quality. It's even more important than we thought. So it's certainly something for which we have to have an awareness program, both for witnesses and members in the future. But at the end of the process, for members, we're counting on them to use the tools that are available. If a member finds that the tool is not the best for them, there are other options available. other headsets with one ear, for instance, as you mentioned in another meeting. Ear pads, for instance, having a table microphone. There are other options if a member finds that the current headset is not ideal for their needs. And Stéphane's team will certainly work with the House team, with any member who needs support on this issue. But who's responsible for pointing out to members that they're not wearing the right microphone and are harming our interpreters' hearing? It's up to the members themselves to be responsible for those things. Chairman of committee know that if there's an interruption in the House, the Speaker will stop proceedings or even go on to the next person. But it's very important in the end for members to use the available equipment. Fine. Now, my question is about the number of interpreters. That's not documented. If we lacked interpreters, we had many committees because we have had many committee meetings canceled because the technical human resources were not sufficient. So the interpreter part of this is not documented, so perhaps I should ask my questions under point 11, unless the speaker wants me to ask these questions now, because I'm very worried about committee trips that were adopted at the liaison committee. Many of them are going to go abroad. They're accompanied by interpreters. If all these committees leave to travel to have these studies and bring interpreters with them, will there be enough interpreters left in Parliament, perhaps a hybrid Parliament or not, to meet the needs of parliamentarians who are in Parliament and in committee? Can you tell me that? That is a question through you, Mr. Speaker. It's very difficult to answer that because there are many variables. As you mentioned, are we going to have hybrid meetings or not? The amount of time that the interpreters are available, that has an impact. If the meetings are in person or hybrid, that's one element. There's also whether all the committees travel at the same time. Can they hire interpreters in the countries or places where they'll visit, or is it necessary to bring Canadians with them from here? So those are some of the variables, but there are others. Mr. McDonald, I see there's only one committee that hires interpreters on site, international trade. Others are accompanied by interpreters from here. Without saying we're going to lack interpreters, do you think we have a risk here, given the shortage and the fact that the hybrid parliament may continue? Yes, that's certainly a possibility, but there are other ways to manage this. On weeks that the House doesn't sit, the committees could travel. Even to get back on one thing, there's only one committee that hires interpreters on site where they travel. But the budget to bring interpreters could be used to hire people in other places too. Even that, if that's not planned, there are other ways, and we'll see how we can maximize the availability of interpreters to support meetings here in Ottawa, even if committees travel. But there's a risk. If interpreters travel with a committee and are not available for another meeting that day, it depends how much time the committee will travel. There are many variables. We have to look at each case individually. to see what the impact is, as we do today when we look at the impact of availability of interpreters for meetings. Every day, we send a message to your offices. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that you're good at answering questions, Mr. McDonald, but you're not reassuring me. We'll probably be fragile in terms of human resources interpretation. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen chairmen who had the bad habit of having informal meetings organized by the clerk with no interpreters because there's no resources. Many committees were canceled because of the hybrid model. So it's true, you can't give me a definitive answer, but it's not very reassuring considering that we haven't yet made decisions about continuing a hybrid parliament or not and how we're going to operate in the fall. So I have enough information to make up my own mind. Maybe it's not a great idea to have committees travel abroad. Thank you very much for your answers, and congratulations on your report. Questions and comments? Okay, can we continue? Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. There's no decision to be made, but there's certainly questions that have been raised. Number 11. Are we still doing that, or have we covered it? Does everyone agree?
This report? Good, I think that's fair. Good, we have good. Now, down to item number 11. Have we already covered that, or would you like to? Est-ce qu'on a couvert numéro?
Have we covered number 11, or do we continue? The dashboard. Do we continue with number 11, or has it been covered? I just had one question for Mr. Obey on 11. Mr. Obey. My question is a simple one. Throughout the year, you testified about the improvements you made to the sound system to try as much as possible to meet the standards, the quality standards for interpreters. You told us last time that you had a study ongoing. Could you give us an update? What are your conclusions? Have they arrived yet, or are you waiting till fall? Mr. Speaker, go ahead, Mr. Obey. Yes, Ms. de Bellefeuille, we got the report. We got the final report that consultants gave us last week. Our first step was to meet with the Translation Bureau Interpretation Group, and we shared this document with them. There was an executive summary. We also shared the detailed document, and we're in discussion with them and the NRC and discuss the various differences that we noted in our document. The idea is also to share it with members of this board and present. We will share a document that's a summary of maybe not recommendations, but the findings. I'm looking for the word in French. What we found out as to be the facts. Our in-person systems meet ISO standards, as we thought. And the quality of our virtual systems, too, have excellent quality. However, they made recommendations, too, about microphones and headsets. Standardize that. You were asking about standardizing microphones and the importance of that for users who are remote. The answer is yes, that's necessary. All the tools that are recommended are the tools that we should be using, Ms. de Bellefeuille. We'll share the document with you and other members. We didn't want to share it on a wide scale. We wanted to meet with some people from the Translation Bureau, interpreters, as a first step. That's what we wanted to do first. Mr. Julian. Well, Mr. Obey, when will this be available? We could submit it quickly, Mr. Julian. Today? No? Inaudible. Could it be available next Thursday? We'll work with the Translation Bureau and see whether we can give you a copy, if we can get that and have it translated as quickly as possible. Because it seems to me that Ms. de Bellefeuille's questions are relevant. We've had discussions about this for several weeks. We have a pilot project that will be implemented in the coming months. The interpreters do enormous work, extraordinary, valuable work. So we want to do everything possible to put in place everything necessary so that their health and safety in the workplace is assured. I think that is shared by all members of the Board of Internal Economy. In my opinion, this information could be critical and very important. It will be our last meeting for some time next Thursday. We could have a discussion on these questions, and that could be very important. Okay, from what I'm hearing, that's when it will be ready and translated and distributed to members. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. We'll continue with number 12, Report to Canadians. Mr. Charles Robert, Clerk of the House of Commons. Mr. Robert. Hello. It's my pleasure to present the Report to Canadians 2022, the annual report of the House of Commons.
It's an overview of the work carried out by members of Parliament during the fiscal year 2021-22, as well as efforts of the House of Commons administration to support you. This year's report showcases the House pursuit of service excellence, and it demonstrates how the House administration was able to ensure that business would continue while introducing new programs and enhancing services to members. For example, the highlights from the Hill section speaks about the efforts to support the opening of the 44th Parliament. For the first time, the members' orientation program was offered in a hybrid format. This included welcoming and swearing in re-elected and newly elected members and accompanying outgoing members in person or virtually. This section also details the launch of a new application that enables members to easily submit employment-related requests. It showcases a timeline of significant events during the year, including the dissolution of the 43rd Parliament in August and the 44th general election in September, and the opening of the 44th Parliament and the election of the Speaker. Pour souligner le centenaire.
To underscore the centennial of the historical election of the first woman MP, the section includes a list of pioneers who have marked the evolution of our parliamentary institutions throughout the last 100 years. In the Members' Activities section, the Report to Canadians 2022 explains the magnitude of the work of members in the House and committee and during their international and interparliamentary activities during the past year. The Results Report section describes how employees of the House administration provided ongoing support to members, notably by ensuring the continuity of House activities and by protecting the health and safety of its employees in the past year. For example, it includes an overview of the latest progress on the rehabilitation work being done on Centre Block, the renewal of the Legis Info website, and the addition of a new fundamental value of House administration, inclusion.
Approval, the report will be tabled in the House and made available on ourcommons.com, or .ca, pardon me. A promotional image of the report for use in householders and constituency mail has been prepared for you and will be available on the Printing and Mailing Services website. This will give you an opportunity to highlight the report in your communications with your constituents. We will also share the report through our social media channels and with our parliamentary partners and legislative counterparts. The Report to Canadians 2022 is offered in a printable HTML format It is mobile, friendly, and accessible. Alors, je vous remercie.
So I thank you for your attention, and I'm available to answer your questions. Questions or comments? Ms. de Bellefeuille. Mr. Speaker, I read the entire report. It was so interesting, and I said I was going to use excerpts to meet with the students we sometimes meet because it's very synthesized, it's very well done with internet links. So I want to thank you for the accessibility of this report. Sometimes reports are made, but they're not made to be read. They're made to be shelved in a library. But your report this year is very interesting, Mr. Robert. Well, that's exactly it, Ms. de Bellefeuille. That's one of our objectives, to make this more accessible and interesting for citizens, because the activities of Parliament are so important for the nation. And we find that by presenting this report in a format that's more interesting and intriguing even for citizens and useful, especially for you when you meet with your constituents, to demonstrate quickly that it's not just you who does this work, but all members, all of Parliament. There's just the whips part that I think you didn't detail sufficiently. Oh, okay, I'll take note of that. No, thank you. Bravo for this work. I think it's a very good report that merits to be read. Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? So, do we agree?
To the House of Commons. Question bilingue que j'ai faite, okay?
That was a bilingual question on my part. Thank you very much.
Il nous reste seulement numéro...
We only have number 6 in 10 minutes. I don't think we have enough time. Mr. Julian and then Ms. de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's number 3, which should be the first item on the agenda next Thursday. We also have some discussions that will take place in the coming days. And we have the question of interpreters. So, I think we already have quite a lot on our plate for next Thursday, but I'd like to propose by starting with the Centre Block Working Group and the Parliamentary Precinct, and I think Ms. de Bellefeuille suggested a report inaudible. The incident of last week, the security incident, and the notice sent to members. Yes, Ms. de Bellefeuille, you had something to add? I just wanted to say that we should probably not start another topic, but if you want, perhaps we could stop this meeting. I'd like to talk to my counterparts following this meeting on the whole issue of travel of committees and interpreters. Mr. Bressard.
Yeah, I'm okay with the agenda next week. I think we should defer item 6 as well. And we'll talk about what Mr. Belfoy wants to talk about afterwards. Thank you.
Very good. So I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for all your cooperation today. We did cover a lot of ground.